Hi guys, it's Reagan and welcome back to another video. Today I am filming one of my favorite videos to film every single year, and that is the top books I want to read in 2022. I love a TBR. I love a list. So every year kind of creating my main priorities for the year is always one of my favorite things to do. It kind of allows me to take a step back, look at my shelves and really contemplate what genres and what series I want to prioritize throughout the next 365 days. I cannot believe it's 2022, basically around the corner. While I might have very little in my life planned out for next year, I will at least have a solid TBR I can reference. Priorities. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in. Normally I keep this TBR to 10 books, but I couldn't help myself and I expanded it a bit to 12. But nonetheless, I'm very excited about all of them, so let's just chat. So the first set of books is actually a series. This is a series I hope to read from start to finish throughout the entirety of this year. And I don't feel like it should be a huge surprise, and that is the Rain Wild Chronicles by Robin Hobb. This is the fourth series within Robin Hobb's universe, and I have been making my way through all of her series over the past couple of years. Robin Hobb is one of my all-time favorite fantasy writers. I love her series so much. I read the Tawny Man trilogy last year, so I just want to continue on with my momentum to work my way through her entire list of books. This particular series is a quartet, which is a bit of a departure than her normal structure. I've only read trilogies by her, so this is a little fun, a little spice for the new year. I'm particularly excited about this series because we're going to go back to the Rain Wild location and geography, which, if you're familiar with her world, is a geographical location that I think is honestly fascinating. It has a bit of ancient magic, it has a bit of an ancient curse, if you will, and is very much associated to the dragons, which is fitting because the first one is called Dragon Keeper. I'm also hoping to run into some of my favorite characters from the Live Ship Trader trilogy, which I still think is my favorite trilogy to date that I've read by Robin Hobb. So I am hoping to run into a few characters from that time, but I hope this is just full of dragons and trading and magic and Robin Hobb's incredible writing that also breaks your heart into a million pieces. I truly do not know what I'm going to do when I run out of Robin Hobb books to read. I feel like I'll probably just start over and begin a reread of all of her series, but for now, luckily, I have this entire quartet to work my way throughout 2022, and so this is the first book slash series that I have on my TBR. Next up, I have a very beloved YA duology that just recently wrapped up, and I've just heard so many fantastic things about, so I want to get to it, and I actually want to read it very, very soon. And that is These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. I plan to read this and its sequel, hopefully back to back, because I feel like it's like a perfect opportunity to marathon. But this is a Romeo and Juliet retelling set in the 20s in Shanghai, and it also follows two rival gangs that hate each other, have been trying to destroy each other, so it obviously becomes complicated when the two leaders also begin having feelings for each other. I've heard so many great things about this particular series, from its writing style to just how gruesome and dark it is. I've also heard that These Violent Delights is good. I hear it really shines in the sequel as well as the final book within this series, These Violent Ends, which just calls out to me. It's always nice to hear when a series not only is fantastic in the beginning, in the middle, but also the end, because I feel like it can be really hard to wrap everything up in a satisfying way. So this is a series I really want to get to. I have been reading less YA in general, but there's still so many cool series that really call out to me. And I've also just been trying to prioritize the YA fantasy I feel that for me will be home runs, and I have a very good feeling about this one. Next up is a very beloved story that I'm honestly rather thrilled that I'm finally getting to. That is the Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. The Night Circus, I feel like, is so many people's favorite book. And also just what I know about this tale, it also just sounds like a book that I personally will love. It's known for its lyrical and lush writing style, its sort of magical touch and historical setting. All of those things in general, I'm very much a sucker for. I've also read The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern, which is her newer release, and I really, really loved that. So I just know this will likely be, hopefully, a new all-time fave when I pick it up. This is a story set in a circus that arrives without warning. Yesterday it was not, and today it is there, and it is only open at night, and tomorrow it will be gone. When you enter this circus, you are surrounded by all sights of delights and wonder, and we also follow our two main characters who are are battling magicians. They are essentially apprentices who have been working since childhood alongside each other to become the best magician for this particular circus. But through time, they've also fallen headfirst into love, which sets off a domino effect that kind of impacts everyone around them. I hear this is delightful and romantic and intense and just, again, beautifully written, filled with Erin Morgenstern's incredible atmosphere and metaphor. I have very, very high expectations for this, so we will see if it's able to live up to it, but I have a strong feeling it will. Next up, I have a middle grade read, which I am definitely trying to also prioritize throughout 2022. Middle grade is always one of my favorite genres to pick up, particularly middle grade fantasy. I just find it delightful and charming and just full of wonder and whimsy. I also find them to be wonderful palate cleansers, and I often read them between really intense high fantasy stories. Just love rooting for so many different middle grade protagonists, and just the writing is just delightful. But the middle grade that is on the top of my list for this year is Tristan Strong Punches a Hole in the Sky by Kwame Mabalia, and I have just heard so many fantastic things about this particular series. There's also now 3 books out, so a great one to kind of marathon throughout the year. But this is a story that follows our main character, Tristan Strong, and at the beginning of this book, he is feeling anything but strong. He's grieving and also blaming himself for the tragic death of his best friend Eddie after they are both in a bus accident. Now all that he has left of his best friend is his journal. At the beginning of this book, he is at his grandparents' farm in Alabama, where he has been sent to hopefully have the space and time and heal from this tragedy, but one night a strange creature appears in Tristan's bedroom, and while Tristan is having a hard time believing his eyes, the creature quickly grabs his best friend's journal and leaves Tristan on a chase through the night to a very unusual tree that is on his grandparents' farm. And while Tristan fights this creature to get the journal back, he accidentally punches a hole in the sky above this tree, creating a portal between his world and Mid-Pass. And Mid-Pass is a volatile place with a burning sea, haunted bone ships, and iron monsters that are hunting the inhabitants of this strange world. From there, Tristan Strong finds himself in the middle of a battle that has left the Black American gods exhausted. Now we follow him as he's not only trying to navigate this new world filled with gods, but also make his way back home. I truly cannot wait to pick this book up. I feel like it will also be a new fave. I mean, it's won all the awards. So many people say it's also their favorite series underneath the Rick Riordan Presents umbrella, which honestly always has home runs. I love the Rick Riordan Presents stories. They're full of so much incredible mythology and folklore and magic. So this is the middle grade series I hope to read and catch up on throughout this year, but I also hope to read other middle grade as well. Next up, I have another very popular story that I'm hoping to get to, and that is Beartown by Fredrik Backman. I read A Man Called Ove this past year and really loved it. From Fredrik Backman's incredible character work and just the intimate and emotional journey that he was able to take me on, I fell in love. I laughed, I cried. Fredrik Backman is a very beloved author. So many of his stories are just international bestsellers across the world. Like, so many people really enjoy his works. I've particularly heard fantastic things about Beartown, which is also going to be adapted into a TV show. This is a story that centers around a community, which is a very small town set deep in the woods, and it's called Beartown. And Beartown hasn't been the best at anything in a very long time. Down by the lake stands an old ice rink, and that is where the junior ice hockey team practices. And they are actually about to compete in the national semifinals and have a really big shot at winning. This possibility has gotten the town ecstatic, and now all the hopes and dreams of this very place rest on the shoulders of a bunch of teenage boys. And under that heavy burden, the semifinal match actually becomes a catalyst for a very violent act that will leave one girl traumatized and the entire town up in turmoil. This is a story about a town and a game, but even more than that, loyalty, commitment, and the responsibilities of friendship. The people we disappoint even though we love them, and the decisions we make every day that come to define us. In this story, a small forest town and Fredrik Backman have found the entire world. This just sounds like it's going to have so many layers. I already know I love Fredrik Backman's character work and his writing. I just feel like he has such a way to sort of draw you in. I also love that this is a community, small town focused story. I cannot wait to pick this book up, but again, I sort of feel like that for every book I am talking about in this video. The next book should not be too much of a surprise. I have the Dragon Reborn by Robert Jordan on this list as well. Last year I started my Wheel of Time journey, which honestly has so far been a lot of fun, and I read the first 2 books. From there, I'm really hoping to continue my reading of this particular series by reading at least 2 or 3 more this year. I feel like I can kind of take my time and savor each book. There is no rush. They've been out for a long time and I'm really ecstatic that I'm finally getting to them. That being said, I am really looking forward to seeing how the plot is going to kind of expand beyond the sort of traditional quest structure of following the same characters that we've sort of seen within the first 2 books. We've had hints of the larger political structure. I also have a feeling there's going to be time skips and other books will kind of center other characters I haven't even met yet. But so far from what I've read of The Wheel of Time, I've really enjoyed the writing style. I really enjoy how classic it is. It feels like a very homey read as someone who reads a lot of fantasy. It just is honestly rather delightful. I have reading vlogs of my experience of the first 2 books, but I for sure want to continue on with this read throughout next year. I'm hopeful that I'll be able to read it eventually, all of it eventually. But nonetheless, books 3, 4, and 5, I'll say, are on my TBR for 2022. The next 2 books on my list are both historical fiction. Historical fiction was one of my primary reading goals, or reading more of it was one of my primary reading goals for 2021. And I would say I was generally successful, and in thinking about the next year, it's going to continue to be one of my priority goals, that and reading more literary fiction in general, basically taking my fantasy share down from like 95% to 85% and mixing in a few other genres. These 2 historical fiction books I'm about to show off, I would say, are at the top of my list, but there are so many I want to read. The first book is actually probably one of the oldest books on my TBR. I picked it up when I was in college and I've held on to it. It's moved all across the country with me because I've always been interested to read it. And finally, it feels like it's time for me to pick this book up. And that is A Tale for the Time Being by Ruth Ozeki. So many aspects of this particular story call out to me. For one, the synopsis sounds very, very emotional, and it has fantastic reviews. And Ruth Ozeki actually recently came out with a new book, which kind of put this book back on my radar, but also just some of the narrative elements of this book are some of my favorite. Primarily, it's kind of bringing together 2 unlikely characters across time and space. The story opens on our first main character, who comes across a Hello Kitty lunchbox that kind of washes up on the shore on her very remote island in the Pacific Northwest. In it, she finds a strange collection of items, which includes a diary of a young girl. She suspects that it washed all the way here due to the tragic tsunami that hit Japan in 2011. And once Ruth picks up this diary, she's quickly drawn into this young girl's world and is also drawn by the mystery of what happened to her. And from there, we follow our other main character in perspective now, who lives in Tokyo. She herself is battling extreme loneliness after her family uprooted their life in the United States and moved to Japan. She's bullied in school. She does not have very many friends, so she's kind of turned to documenting her grandmother's life into her own secret diary as a way to sort of escape from the everyday. And this is the very diary that washes up on Ruth's shore. Full of Ruth Ozeki's signature humor and insight, it is said to explore the relationship between reader-writer, fact and fiction, as well as history and memory. I've heard so many fantastic things about this. I truly feel like I'm going to love it. I also feel like I might cry while reading it, but nonetheless, this is truly one of the top books on my TBR for the year. I'm hoping to get to this in early 2022. The next book I have talked ceaselessly recently about on my channel. It has been on so many different TBR videos. I feel like you will not be surprised when you see it. That is A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles. I've been wanting to read this book for so long. I naturally had to put it on my 2022 TBR, and if I don't read it, somebody please yell at me. I want to get to this book for so many reasons. First and foremost, I feel like the plot and setup of this book is one I'm going to really enjoy. It also takes place during a time period I'm personally fascinated by. I'm also just really curious to read some stories by this author who I feel like could possibly be a new fave. Really known for writing very character-focused historical fiction stories set during very specific time periods, which calls out to me. But in A Gentleman in Moscow, we basically follow a man who has been deemed an unrepentable aristocrat by the Bolshevik government, and he has been sentenced to house arrest in this hotel, which is across the street from the Kremlin. There he basically spends his whole life in an attic, sort of documenting his life and also his perspective on some of the most tumultuous years in Russian history that are unfolding right from his window in his new home. This is a story that centers our main character, but we also see a variety of different people that also preside in this place, and I truly just feel like I'm going to love this book so much. I love Russian history. I think the setup of this book is just so interesting. Again, I've included it in so many videos, so hopefully that means I actually pick this book up and read it. I'm also really interested in a lot of other books this author has put out, but I would say this is kind of the top of the list for me, and then from there, We'll see. I own like 4 of his books, so they're already on my shelf, ready to go. Next book is a sequel, and I'm so happy to finally be able to pick it up, and that is Muse of Nightmares by Laini Taylor. Ironically, Muse of Nightmares has been on many of these yearly TBR videos, but this time I feel like I really mean it because I just reread Strange the Dreamer and loved it so much. Like, it is truly one of the best YA fantasy books out there. I was delighted, heartbroken, moved by that story, and it's also very fresh in my mind because I just recently reread it. That being said, I feel like I'm finally ready to actually pick this book up and be able to enjoy it to its full extent because I feel so connected to Strange the Dreamer as we speak. So Muse of Nightmares was a must-add for me, but this is a story that is a duology. We follow 2 main perspectives. One of them is Laszlo Strange, and he's basically an orphan who spends his life working within a library, and in his free time, he basically obsessively researches this place called the City of Weep. This particular city has lost its name, and its history has also been kind of thrown into a place of legend versus history, but Laszlo feels this place very much still exists, and he's going to learn as much about it as he possibly can. And then one day an envoy from the city itself arrives, and they are gathering a variety of different types of experts to help them with some unknown problem, and Laszlo travels with them to this city. We follow him as he works to uncover the mystery of this city itself, and it's just so delightful and emotional. The other perspective is incredible as well. Just Laini Taylor's writing and just everything about this book is next level. So I want to wrap up my read of this duology finally, as I have never gotten to Muse of Nightmares, but I'm so looking forward to it. So I have this on my TBR for this year. Next up, I have a very beloved ancient story retelling, and that is Cersei by Madeline Miller. I read The Song of Achilles like a lot of people did last year and really enjoyed it, and it also kind of reawoke my realization I love any type of reimagining of a well-known and beloved story, and that's what we have here with Cersei. I already know I love Madeline Miller's writing, so I feel like this could be hopefully a home run for me. But this reimagines the life of Cersei, who of course sets up a lot of the things that occur in the Odyssey, that well-known classic. But this I feel like is going to take a much more intimate and sort of holistic view on Cersei as a character herself. She's obviously kind of painted as an off character, sort of a witch that caused a lot of things to occur, but we don't really have the context to have empathy for her. I'm so looking forward to picking this book up, and it also sort of serves as a stand-in because I have a lot of like retellings and ancient retellings of well-known myths that I want to read more of this year as well. But this I would say is probably at the top of my list because I already know how much I love this author. And yes, Cersei. Next book is the first book to a very beloved and well-known fantasy series, and probably my last, or one of my last, like newer fantasy series I'll start for this year, but again, you never know. I have a lot of series I've started near the end of last year that I want to continue to catch up on, but this is like a new read, a new checkout for me. And that is Malice by John Gwynne. This is a series I have seen so many people shout from the rooftops about. I have read a John Gwynne book before, The Shadow of the Gods, which I liked. John Gwynne, I feel like, is known for his combat writing, really gruesome. He's kind of like a Viking in real life, so he has very much Viking vibes in a lot of his books, at least the stories I myself has read. But this is a many book series that follows a variety of characters who are all warriors in their own right. To be honest, I've purposely not looked up too much about this book outside of people's just initial reactions because I kind of like going into new fantasy series as blind as I can. But this is set in the Banished Lands, a place that has a violent history of conflict between man and giants. And in this book, giants are beginning to rise once again, so there's an opportunity for glory and more bloodshed. We follow, it looks like, a variety of characters who all have different types of skill with sword or axe, and they all have their own lives and points of views, and I guess kind of varying degrees of interest of even participating in violence once again. I am looking forward to this. This might be kind of like a war band style story, but we'll see. I love a gruesome fantasy tale. I already know I like John Gwynne's writing, and I'm looking forward to picking up a very hyped series and hopefully reading a few books within this world. The next book that's on my TBR is If I Had Your Face by Frances Cha. This is a literary fiction story that I've heard so many things about, and I included it recently in books I wish I read in 2021, and I would say this was the book I got the most comments about, saying how how much people loved the story, how many people said they added it to their own personal favorites list. So that really catapulted it to right at the top of my TBR, and I now know I need to read this as soon as possible. But this is a story set in modern day Seoul, and we follow the perspectives of 4 different women who live or live near each other within the same building. All of them sort of lead different lives and have different jobs. They're all touched by society's pressure for women. It's a story about 4 young women making their way in a world defined by impossible beauty standards, after-hour room salons catering to wealthy men, and the ruthless social hierarchies of Korea. I've heard amazing things about this particular story from you guys, from blogs, from reviews, and I just feel like this will be one that will stay with me for a long time, and I feel like will leave a huge impact. And I'm also, again, just trying to read more literary fiction throughout this year, and I feel like this is a perfect one to check out. And the very last book that is on my TBR for 2022, I don't physically own, but it would actually be a reread for me, and that is Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan McGuire. This is the first book to Seanan McGuire's sort of novella series. I've read the first one many, many years ago, but she's since come out with a lot of books. All of them are super beloved across BookTube, and I just feel like I want to give this series another try because I do really feel like I will love it. This is a story that's set in a home for wayward children. All of the children that live here have basically, in one way or another, have slipped to another world, and now they're back home. And they sort of emotional trauma of having been ripped away from a fantastical experience. In this particular story, we follow our main character Nancy, and she is a new and recent arrival at this particular home. With her arrival, tragedy strikes. Now it's up to Nancy and her newfound schoolmates to work to try to find a resolution and basically get to the heart of this issue itself. Again, this is a series I feel like with a reread, I'm going to absolutely love it. The first novella synopsis obviously is rather vague because they're pretty short, but there's many novellas that build on itself. I think the concept of a home for wayward children who are basically having to deal with the aftermath of having some sort of fantastical experience is a really fascinating one, and I just know Seanan McGuire is going to explore that in a lot of different ways. I already know I love her writing. I read Middle Game a couple years ago and loved it, so this is a series I'm hoping to get back into this year and slowly read throughout the year, as the books themselves, again, are so short. I feel like it'll be easy to fit it in, but this is the last book that is on my 2022 TBR. But I hope you guys enjoyed, and please let me know down below the top books you hope to read throughout this year, as I would love to know. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you soon with another one soon. Goodbye!